You're not live yet, right?
We are.
There's an echo. Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone who's joining us from the warm Johannesburg weather, place with beautiful weather. My name is Dan Mukosa. I'm one of the partners in Biotechnologies Africa. I head the Management Consultants division.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Toela, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Bytech. And Bytech is a digital transformation services company. So thank you for joining us. The whole purpose of today, I'm very excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. We are here today because we want to create awareness and share knowledge on strategy execution and monitoring best practice. At the end of today's webinar, you will be in a very good position to take some nuggets and actually take some of the practical tips that you will hear in the webinar and take those back into your organization and see if you can actually practice them. So today is all about awareness, it's all about strategy, and it really is around what is best practice when it comes to strategy. Okay. So let's just get right into it and start talking about strategy execution and monitoring, best practice. So from our last webinar, there was quite a lot of debate in terms of what strategy is. A lot of people use the word strategy, but strategy has a different meaning in a different context. So maybe just to get the ball rolling done, can you just define what strategy is again, but from your perspective?
Great, Toela. So I think I did explain in the last conversation that strategy is a very ambiguous term organization use. In fact, the way it's probably used is that any high-level project becomes strategic. And that's what brought the ambiguity, because people are saying that if the CFO or the CEO comes up with a project, isn't that strategic? And I was like, no, it could be very operational. But let's reiterate the term, and then I'll break it down just a little bit, although that's not really the focus of the conversation. That strategy is literally a forward-looking action plan. So it's foresight for the future, which leverages a company's opportunity, strength, market placing, ability to compete, anything the company can use on its side to help it beat the market. When I say beat the market, the company defines what beating the market is. It could be market growth, it could be new inroads, it could be producing new products. It could be being ahead of the curve from an innovation or being the front runners in the organization. But there's something which actually needs to be outperformed. So when we talk about strategy, and we bring it back to kind of original where it came from, it's actually a military term which was coined to create plans which help an army defeat an enemy which has got some unknown unknowns and known unknowns. So it's not a straightforward where we're just going in, we use our numbers, and then we overwhelm the competition. So in the business sense, the simple version is it's foresight, action plan to try to be competitive in the market. Hopefully now that
That
debunks some
clarifies it.
ambiguity
And the
between
three
operations and
levels,
strategy.
Dan, because last time the conversation was really around the three levels of strategy, what those are, what that looks like.
Okay, so there are actually 4 levels, but we're going to keep it to the 3. So the first one is kind of the corporate strategy. So I always simplify it in this way. That's a mandate from the shareholder or from your board. As simple as that. So I don't want to complicate it again. Simple term, your mandate, what is it you want to achieve? Where is it you want to go? And the second level is what people would call kind of the business or the operating strategy, which now converts that mandate into a business plan. So now you have your strategic plans, you have your business plans, you have your budgets, and all the plans we can develop in our corporate, which helps us achieve the shareholder mandate or the board objectives. Then once you have the business plan, it has to be executed. The plan doesn't kind of sort of work it here. So we break it down kind of to the functional strategy where each function or each business unit, each business, output driven department breaks down their contribution to the strategy. They come and say, okay, from this big mandate and this plan, this is what we're going to do to contribute to it. So then it's got the 3 levels, and then you can break it down literally to the individual, where the individual, which could be a line function, which could be a supervisor, comes and says, what does this mean for me to have a strategy? So that's generally the definition of how you break down the strategy in the organization. And I think that's what brings a lot of ambiguity, because somebody sees the functional strategy and comes and says, yeah, but I'm doing strategy. I'm like, yeah, but we're talking about kind of where it starts from, the intent of the shareholder. Where is it captured, and what exactly are we doing about it?
I hope that clarifies
it.
So thank you. I hope that puts that argument to rest. So it's the corporate strategy, business strategy, and then the functional strategy. And then lower level, we get down to the individual strategy. So now let's talk about execution, right? In your experience, I mean, you've got a lot of experience and working with different customers in different industries, public sector, private sector. For a successful execution to happen, what would best practice look like? So if someone had a checklist, what would they need to tick off to make sure that, you know, they're executing that strategy well?
Okay. So last time we bucketed it into 3 buckets, but now that you've mentioned checklists, let me create a checklist. I think the checklist has got 6 parts to it for best practice in strategy execution. The first one is the governance. So if you tick box as a governance part, meaning what are the rules of engagement? How is this strategy going to be driven? How is it going to be tracked? How is it going to be measured? Generally, if you're going to implement a strategy and you don't have business cases behind the initiative already, that will be a challenge, because the intent of the shareholder is completely lost. We need to understand, we need to differentiate that the operations mandate is to keep production, keep availability, keep the cash flow ticking.
Yeah, keep
the shareholder mandate is bring new, grow new, change to new. So that becomes very ambiguous. And if you don't have the boundaries around it, you struggle to actually execute it. In fact, what's going to happen is No one tracks, no one monitors. End of the year, the shareholder report, you probably do a strategic review, and then the line function will go and try to say, what did we do? What did we achieve? And try to make themselves look good. And that's it. So there's no proactivity. There's no early warnings. There is no deliberate escalations for failure to implement the strategy, or even successes, celebrating successes. That's the first element on the checklist. The second one is
So
resource
good
allocation.
governance. So
Sorry?
you would say having good governance.
Yes. So having a governance structure framework. If you really care enough about strategy, then you treat it the way you treat your operations business. You pretty much have everything you have around to execute it. I think the second thing why they actually fails, and this is genuinely a big problem specifically for small to medium companies. I mean, we've done strategy from small to medium to multinationals, is allocation of resources. I reiterated last time to say usually there's a number I've been using since I've been doing strategy in 20 years, since 2011, of 70-30, which I learned from McKinsey, where 70% of effort and costs should go to operations, 30% is literally minimum, should be to your strategy, so to your innovation.
So that would be a best practice.
That would be best practice. In fact, when we go in and we're helping companies doing strategic reviews, the first thing I check is the resource allocation or the time allocation or the budget allocation. And I'm like, but you're not doing anything with your strategy. This cannot be what the company relies to survive on in the next 2-3 years if we have got disruptors. I mean, we now live in this VUCA environment where things change continuously. And if this is our...
define VUCA, then you're just using these acronyms.
No,
some people might...
Let us leave the VUCA. We are living in an environment where things just change instantly. There's disruption which is coming left, right, and center. I don't think there's an industry right now which is not being disrupted, and the disruptor is not even seen upfront, is not even known. I mean, we did a strategy a couple of years ago before COVID for a telco, and the strategy was literally centered around competing in the financial sector, literally as a fintech, and to compete with banks. And that was something we were trying to drive. I don't know if 2-3 years before, prior to that, banks saw that telcos would be one of their biggest competitors, obviously the enabler of the technology in it. So when we talk about the VUCA, without really going to the description of the word, because I don't want it to be the focus, is we're talking about a very volatile, I guess, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment.
Thank you. That didn't hurt.
Yeah, so
what else?
The resource allocation generally fails. In fact, one of the most successful strategy execution I've observed was from a medium to large company. It was actually trying to grow from 200 to about a billion rands. Was the CEO actually gave 70-80% of his time on the strategy. That was actually unbelievable because it ran ideal. And in probably 2-3 years, they didn't get to their billion. They're supposed to get to a billion. They were very ambitious. They were wanted to grow 5 times in 2 years, but they managed to get like 640 million rands. But that was because the CEO, and I know when they watch this, they'll probably know who I'm talking about, because I would say this is really a masterclass on how strategy is actually done. And one of the days we should actually bring them to talk to it, because I'd actually printed the strategy and put it in their diary, and their normal day-to-day when they open their laptop was the key activities in the strategy. And that was really just brilliant. So resource, to just go it. The second thing. The third thing I would really come and say is tracking and monitoring. Yeah, strategic review is not tracking and monitoring. It's probably just a review as it is. Is nothing, what you can't measure, what you can't track and monitor, you can't really control. And we need to also understand, bring down the governance, is that when companies create these performance appraisals for employees, for departments, so this is your contract and what you're going to perform for your bonus and stuff, it's 99.99% operations. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to focus on operations, and I'm going to track the operations to show that I'm doing good so that it actually looks like I'm really great. No one is tracking. If you don't even have resources allocated, actually, resources means people. Without people dedicated to actually implement strategy, I think I just said about the CEO. What the CEO did is that he brought people to work. She brought people to work in the office of the CEO just to help her focus and make sure that there's outputs and the impact we talked about last time, the impact on the strategy is achieved, not the results of the initiative being executed. That is a guarantee, but the impact. The allocation of people. So if you don't have people, you're not going to track, you're not going to monitor. And if you don't even have the two, it means you don't even know you're actually driving blindly. So that would be the third thing where strategies fail because they actually don't need that. Fourth thing, talking about people, is change management. Strategy requires three things to happen: a culture change, a behavior change, a performance change. And people don't really look at it that way. So the people side of change doesn't happen. The communication, I call it the three eyes of leadership. Something which I was told, I said the three eyes always fail: information, interaction, involvement. Doesn't happen. Can you imagine now if the CEO is spending 70% of their time doing strategy? Everyone is informed about it. Everyone is involved. And everyone is interacting around the strategy, perhaps even contributing. But it actually fails. It just doesn't exist. So you find that we're coming up with this new technology, new innovation, new market placement, but we're not taking our people with. We just assume just suddenly it's actually going to happen without really putting, our effort. Number 5, champion. A strategy needs to be championed. I think I re-emphasized, I talked about it under the people. I said ideally it should be a CEO. It's not going to be the CEO, let's be honest. Especially in the multinationals, where they are very busy. They are preoccupied, commercial sales they need to do, and they need to be able to drive. That's not going to happen. Perhaps the next person, the CFO. But what I said last time is I said anyone who's got interest in creating shared value can be the champion. So they have to be C-suite. So there has to be value created for the shareholder, the organization, the employee. Anyone who's got interest in that should actually champion it. You find that usually there's no champion. We get a strategy from the board. I mean, I sit on 6 boards, so I understand. You give it to line function, then you come and say, when they want the feedback, we get together, we do some reports. There's no sponsorship there. There's no escalation mechanism. And like I said, everyone else is doing operations. Who's going to care? But I mean, one of the utilities we worked with, they were doing 110% operations because they were not meeting the customer's need. I kept on telling them, you've got such an ambitious strategy, you might as well just scrap it because no one even bothers looks at it. The last thing is you need a roadmap. A roadmap, clear steps. Step 1, step 2. It's clear milestones. How do we know that it's working? Which talks to the tracking and monitoring, your dashboarding, your BI should work very well. The milestone gives you, a runway gives you 2 things which usually miss in strategy and people don't measure. How well are you doing with your strategy and how successful are you? The success measures your efficiency in execution and it also measures your productivity in the execution of your strategy. Those, I think, would be the 6 I can think of in my head if you were to create a checklist and come and say, is our strategy execution ticking the boxes? Those 6, I think, would get you there as best practice.
So maybe just to wrap up what you just said, maybe just to synthesize what you said, you did start off with governance, saying that you need a good governance structure to put some rules of engagement in place. And then you said it's very important to have that resource allocation, whether it's budget, time, people. You actually emphasized on the people. And then I'll go into change management, having a good change management framework, because there's a lot of new things coming on board. So let's take the people along the journey with our strategy. And then you also spoke about a champion, being sure to have a champion. Then you also said it shouldn't be the CEO to champion it. Maybe the next person would be the CFO, but you did say best practice would be someone who has the interest in actually driving that shareholder value, would make
Shared value, shared,
the
not just
shared
shared.
value is someone who would make a very good champion, strategy champion. And then you talked about monitoring using a tool. And I must say, from our last webinar, we ran a poll, and the poll showed that not a lot of people are actually using a tool to help them track and monitor their strategy. So having a tool, having that dashboard will really help you when it comes to execution. So now going on to that, and just also following from the last webinar, I want to talk about tracking and monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two things that really came out. It was how best can we do the tracking and monitoring,
Mm-hmm.
as well as how can we manage the risk of the strategy not, achieving the impact or achieving the return on investment, or even achieving that shared value that you spoke about. So can we maybe just, I would actually like to hear from the people in the audience. Just drop in the chat. How are you tracking and monitoring? Odan, what was the question we wanted to ask?
Look, I mean, to me, it's as simple as that. How do you ensure that you can track and monitor your strategy? How do you know its efficiency? How do you know that it's actually being done? It's been done at the right pace and done correctly. So we are respecting it to be the plan which takes us to be a market leader, to be able to beat the market. So let's give it that respect. What have you done to show that that is actually happening? Is it one of those where, look, we just give it a line and then we just figure out what happens, do a review, see, renew it, update it, or whatever it is? Or is it one where we're being deliberate? I think it would be very nice to note. I think just following from last week, yes, when we do the poll, there was anyone who said they're actually tracking and monitoring. I think everyone just says we pretty much do the review and then we kind of sort of figure it out how it goes. To be nice to know what people do, if there's anything they do different, what tools they're using to do it. That would be beautiful. But to follow on the conversation, and probably, which is to me the interesting part, is that we said, look, we're going to be having, by the way, for everyone who's actually watching and monitoring, we're going to be having these things, I think, weekly or bi-monthly. I don't know what we've decided, but it will be talking and re-emphasizing certain parts of the value chain in the strategy, just really debugging what the strategy execution is. We're not going to talk about strategy development because there's a million consultants who do a brilliant job. We've experienced some brilliant documents sitting in executive drawers, which no one knows. So that, I think we're good there. I think where this probably webinar will focus probably up until the end of the year is kind of from the planning, execution, and kind of consolidation. Benefit realization. What does that look like?
Yeah.
So anyway, if we go,
in your experience, how do you track and monitor, and what would be the best practice?
So obviously we've developed a tool called ISO, but let's just talk about kind of what's best practice, right? So for the fact that strategy is ambiguous and it's competing with resources, it's competing with operations, it's competing with time, it hardly has any budget allocated to it, it becomes a tricky thing to track. Then the second issue is also around tracking, which is very difficult, is that strategy is not treated in the respect it deserves. What that means is that the initiative should be driven using best practice. Some project management framework should drive the initiative so that you can track, monitor it, right?
Yes.
That usually doesn't happen. You give it, and then there's some guy who's just doing it randomly. And like I said, generally, 99.9% of the time, you don't even have a business case. Why is that a problem? It brings problem number 3. The intent, the strategy intent is not the implementation result. Let me explain that. I think I want to explain that part up until the end of the year. if our strategy is to increase capability, me going through an initiative in HR to do training does not achieve the strategy. It just achieves the initiative of doing training. Do we know if the training has worked? Do we have the competency level at the right level? And most importantly, if we go to the strategy intent, has the productivity improved, the efficiency improved, has the reputation, our customer centricity improved? When we develop these strategic pillars, we have an intent around the strategic pillars, which never, if you don't have a proper business case, goes into the project. So you will find that somebody will give HR your job. I mean, we run a digital company. We get the HR to go and train people, but do we know if it's the right training? Do we know if the training has worked? And this would be our 5-year strategy. Do you know the training could actually take a month? And then we'll be like, done. That's not done. There's nothing done there, actually. It's done from the initiative driving to enable you to achieve your intent, but you still need to monitor and check. Now that we've trained, what was the reason for training? No, we're training because we believed we can do more with less. So has the productivity gone up? Has the rate of output improved? And one of the things we need to focus on is that intent in the strategy.
Yes.
Are we achieving the intent of the strategy as opposed to ticking a box because an initiative has been done? Generally, over post-COVID strategies have now gone to be 2 years. I remember once upon a time when I started doing strategy, we did a 15-year strategy for a big organization I was working for at the time. I think right now, even when people ask me to go 5 years, I'm like, hold up, we can think about the intent, but let's maybe do 2 years with a 3-year look ahead, assuming we're going to have a tailwind with the 2 years to help us, boost us to continue on the path. But we need to probably assess and review. So when it comes to monitoring and tracking, we are trying to monitor the efficiency of it. We are trying to monitor the allocation. If we even think about the checkbox, right? Those 6 things. Now I'm forgetting
the checklist.
Right, the checklist. I think 5 of those things could be monitored and tracked. And that gives you the assurance. It doesn't guarantee leadership, a strategy will be achieved, but it gives you the assurance we're on the right path. It assures us we're on the right path. And as things are changing, because we are tracking and monitoring, we're adapting. I always use this analogy to my clients. We've been using a lot of Waze for our traffic. In Joburg, we do have a lot of traffic during peak period and stuff like that, whoever you're watching. I've been using this analogy to say, you see, when you drive, your strategy is your destination. I'm going home, it's peak afternoon period. But as you go along, people are updating, and it's telling you there's an accident, there's roadblocks, just in case you get some traffic fines or whatever it is. But it gives you the guidance and you change. You don't just get in and sit and come and say, I know the route, it will take me there. Yes, probably most of the time it will get you there. But there's going to be those times when things change. You've got a headwind and not a tailwind against your plan, and everything is messed up, and suddenly it's inconveniences you. So the tracking and monitoring is meant to do that. Obviously, with us having done strategy so many times with different clients, we've literally developed a tool, right? We've developed a tool which does pretty much everything from planning to benefit realization. And we have a module which really just talks to how do you monitor your strategy and what insights can you get to create your early warnings, to be able to escalate and manage the risk on the business case.
Yeah, just explain that risk of the business case, because it talks to the strategy intent to say, are we at risk of not achieving that strategy intent? So it's quite different from a project risk.
Yeah, so they are not mutually exclusive. So the project risk could, or the initiative risk could be affect the strategic risk or the business case risk or the shareholder mandate. So I keep going there because I want to differentiate. A good example would be something like this. We talked about capability, right? A strategy risk would be we don't find trainers or people not attending. So it's delaying, we're not being capable, right? A strategic risk would be COVID happening and people can't now do the physical training for some reason. So something happens which is going to affect the benefit realization. The benefit of the training was we're going to improve productivity. Another good example for improving productivity is suddenly the raw materials or whatever for some production are not available. That affects productivity. So if your strategy from the beginning did not address the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, you have a problem. You can't really check. So when we are doing the risks, is to try to measure and manage the known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So something comes up in the macro, you have this platform, if let's say you get an ISO, you get an AI which says your strategy is actually affected by the new tariffs from America.
Yeah.
This becomes a risk. So as much as all line functions are implementing, they're going ahead, they are chasing their bonus, by the way, right? They will come and tell you, the tariff is not my problem.
The individual strategy.
I want my money.
Yeah, individual
strategy. At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So one of the things we try to do is look at what are the specific activities which are happening internally and externally, which will affect the benefit to be realized. It could be part of the initiative. Might not be part of the initiative, but we need to track it and monitor it. So by the time we go to a strategic review, all those things are addressed. We're not just saying, oh no, we didn't think about it. Yes, we did, or we foresaw it. Well, now we have AI which can give us early warnings in left, right, and center if we give it enough information to tell us to say, oh, okay, actually, this is something which could affect that strategy. Considering other strategies which have been implemented across the globe, they are affected or were affected by this kind of development.
Cool. Okay, so in the next 30 minutes, maybe we can just deep dive a bit more into some tracking and monitoring, maybe some KPIs that you would suggest people use when it comes to tracking and monitoring using dashboards.
Okay, so obviously I could talk to them the whole day. It's something I'm passionate about, but what I would rather do is kind of sort of show and just go through what kind of a brilliant one would actually look like, right? So let me just share my screen. Hopefully today I've got more success in sharing my screen. Share. Tell me, Toela, what do you see?
Okay, I see a dashboard.
Okay, so
before you start, there is a comment in the chat. And the comment is from Puti, and they say from their side, they normally use KPIs for tracking and monitoring.
Okay.
Do you use any tools, Puti? Maybe you can answer in the chat.
Brilliant. So maybe while we're talking, right? So KPIs are a given. I think all the strategies I've done and all the reviews have had some KPIs. So if you remember the analogy I used around Waze, the destination is always there, right? It's somehow it's always there, it's defined. We know we need to get from A to B. I think the challenge here we're talking about is your strategy working? The different way you can look at it is the term I started using 2-3 years ago with different clients. How efficient is your strategy execution? So is it efficient? So you are executing it somehow. When you give it to line functions, they've got KPIs which are combined with their operations generally, or they create specific KPIs. How does it look like? And that's why, for me, even just demoing, I don't want to focus on KPIs because you will find different KPIs and you can develop. And those consultants who help us develop the strategy documents develop brilliant KPIs. But then so what? Because generally those documents sit. So if I think about strategy, I think, like I said, there's probably a couple of things I want to see myself, right? Or an executive wants to see. So first of all, I need to know where I am at any given point in time. I need to know what commitments are we doing. We talked about resources. I need to know if the governance is actually working for the strategy. I need to know if the progress, and the progress is measured in two ways. How many of the strategy activities are we completing, and what are we achieving when it comes to the impact? So those two measure performances. And then perhaps there's other general company-specific KPIs you could actually measure. I'm gonna give kind of, so we have this platform. Last week we talked about the general executive dashboard. I'm not gonna go through it. It gives you the general information around performances. Today, we're gonna deep dive into one specific module, the strategic impact table. So this is where I'm gonna spend my time, and then we can talk about the impact risk, right? So we've infused AI in our initiatives, tracking tool, where we try to get leadership to understand what is working, what is not working, and understand if their strategy is actually performing. So those are three answers we are answering to those C-suite executives whose biggest interest is centered around shareholder value. So if you look, I'm just going to go through like what we did last week. We're not going to go into details to just say what kind of information you can actually have. So we generally have kind of high-level insights generated by a bot in the background. It tells you the overall performance of the strategy. So we measure. So we have all these KPIs, objectives, sub-objectives. All of them are being executed at any given point. It's a 5-year strategy. Where are we percentage-wise? And we try to align everything to a percentage because everyone will understand it. So if you look at here, we are saying our strategy is actually 34% out of 75. This is dummy data, so we couldn't use the client's data for this analysis, but it gives you a good example. It's actually close when the customers. Sub-objectives, only 11 of the sub-objectives are completed across the strategy. So you already know that we're not really doing, or maybe we're not behind. The critical areas of the strategy, growth, operations, these will be like your pillars or your high-level objectives. The leading category is ESG is performing exceptionally well. So if you think about it, we are trying to make a strategy operational, where it literally has a dashboard, which is functioning. I mean, if we went to the overview, going back to the overview, this is changing by the minute. We have alarms to identify, to warn you. We have notifications which come on your phone because this is mobile friendly, and your email at the same time if you're the sponsor. So what we're trying to do here is trying to make sure that it becomes a deliberate attempt to achieve your strategy. And it goes back to the term I brought up in the first webinar, disciplined execution. You are not going to be disciplined if you don't track, monitor, you don't have a framework, and you don't have accountability. There's no disciplined execution. You're just executing. And discipline means just doing the things we need to do when we need to do them, even when we don't want to do them. So this is one of those things. So we have some overview. We have the key indicators. We have 5 objectives. So strategic pillars, 5 objectives from there, 18 sub-objectives. Overall performance is saying 34%. Depending if you're in the first 6 months of a 5-year strategy, that could be brilliant if that's overall performance. We have some dashboards. Maybe let me put it in dark mode because that doesn't show very nicely. Where we track on a monthly basis. So we're not waiting for a strategic review. By the way, all of this can actually be printed. And then it tells you the performance. You can see the ESG there is sitting very well. Operations excellence, 34, customer centricity, 20%. What does this do to the executive responsible? If they can see this on a monthly, even telling them we're not really progressing, what does it do? We even have high-level recommendation based on benchmark on the strategy. This is AI generated, so it's not, so it's generating the system where it tells you the critical areas you should be focusing on from the strategic areas, the underperforming areas. Then it gives you a nice summary. So this company's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pillars. Each one having different objectives. One has got 3, 2, 3, okay, some's got 0. And then it tells you the performance and the status, 2 different things. The performance is, are we achieving the intent, the mandate? The status is telling you, we are supposed to have done training. Did we do it on time? This average performance incorporates 4 or 5 different, so it's an index, a percentage index, levers where it's looking at the different things which contribute to achieving the impact. And it's updated on a daily, monthly, depending on the company, based on what the intent was and how it's been captured, hopefully in a business case, or at least captured on the system. So it gives you a good summary, which you can also print, and it tells you to say, look, status-wise, we're not doing very well on the sub-objectives. The sub-objectives are the initiative, the actions, high-level actions. Or you can bring it down to be the functional strategy line items. So it's telling you this one has got 4, 6, and so on and so on. The next part just tells you where the effort is put. You can see operation excellence is taking up 37% of our strategic effort, or at least initiatives which have been done. So you can see from there, it really gives you the biasness of what the strategy is. So if the mandate from shareholder is growth or customer centricity or innovation, this is already skewed, because it's telling you you're not giving the effort you should actually give to that part of the plan, part of the strategy. Obviously, it breaks it down and it tells you the percentage contribution of each pillar. You can see it as just a repeat of information. And then the last information tells you the status of the sub-object, the initiatives, those functional line items, how many have been achieved. So to get that 34% overall performance for the whole strategy, we've only been able to complete 11% of our sub-objective. This is a very good indication of how high level it gives you how efficient your execution is. The last part of it goes to the impact, strategic impact. So we call it a strategic impact. Now, this is a risk table. It's not different from any risk. The difference is here, there's probably 3 differences. Number 1, we're not measuring only the risk on the project, we're measuring the risk on the impact. So it can be developed by anyone in the strategy execution team can add a risk at any point, can mitigate it. It's got a workflow, unlike probably normal, strategic impacts, where only the sponsor can sign off a risk on the impact to be mitigated, and the sponsor can also reverse it at any point. They can reverse it if they think the impact was not addressed with the mitigation. They can add a mitigation. They can reject what the core team is doing. The sponsor will be somebody who's driving the initiative. So if it's customer centricity, it will be the customer centricity executive. And it sends early warnings and notifications for any changes which happens, and they can update it. So what you have is the normal risk table. What's the risk? Loss of revenue. So generally, you're not going to have that unless you're in the sales department. But let's say we have an impact which has been raised, which has come up, which could affect loss of revenue in the mobile marketing initiative. We say this medium, we're currently escalating. Depending on the action we put, it determines who's going to be involved, who's going to be notification, and the drumbeat of notification. How often do they get emails and notification? If you sign up to the system, your notifications stay on the notification window on the top there. Let me just move that. There, the notifications come, they're updated daily as things happen. New risk management entry has been created, as you can see that. So it's just telling you, and it's telling you to update. Your alarms which come up, you can acknowledge them so that they stop coming, and it records. So you can come and say, I didn't see the notification. It tells you up front. Once the due date is due, the system sends notification to the sponsor to say the risk has not been mitigated. This means the impact is now going to be an issue. It's no longer a risk, it's materialized, and automatically it will go to escalate and manage or monitoring the risk. Those, to me, for now, Toela, will be like These are the two things we use for monitoring and tracking. I know there's a lot of things, there's the actual initiative, but we'll talk about them later on, and we did touch to them last week. And there's also the overview page, which gives you everything from initiative, strategy, teams, team structures, workflow, compliance to the governance. We have a compliance which tells you how compliant are you to the different steps around strategy execution. So you're not just thumbsucking each step as you go along and changing from A to B. So I'm not sure if there's any comments or questions, Toela, but that to me would kind of be a very good indication of how you can use tools and specifically also AI in developing your reports for strategy. These things are available 24/7. So when you do strategic reviews, you don't need to call 100 people to put this thing for board. They can have their own access, a read access on their mobile, and it sends them a notification. So no one acts ignorant at the strategic review as if they didn't know, they are not aware that the tariff is going to affect, because it will notify them and they will see the notification.
Yeah. So just to maybe try and sum up what you've said about tracking and monitoring is that this actually helps organizations become more transparent, and it actually helps with the visibility, because sometimes in organizations people tend to over-report or under-report, meaning they over-emphasize or inflate certain numbers, or maybe they hide certain information because, you know, they don't want to get in trouble, for example. So at least when it comes to strategy execution, it's very good for you to have that information visible and at your fingertips. So a best practice would definitely be have a tool that will help increase the visibility as well as the transparency of where you really are when it comes to monitoring your strategy. Then you talked about early warnings, right? So how can we be proactive? So instead of us waiting for, you know, things to happen and being reactive, tracking and monitoring actually helps you make those decisions, take action, call people, what's going on, what's happening. I've seen a trend here. I've received an alarm. So, but it's an early warning. So it gives it to you before it's too late. So I think that that's another benefit when it comes to tracking and monitoring. And lastly, it's just the notifications, right? Let's get more information. Dan talked about the 3 I's in leadership. Let's get that information. And what way to get it is by through notifications, so that you can then have that site. Maybe you get a notification in an email, or maybe if you come onto the app and you go into your notifications pane, you can actually see what has been happening in the last week, the last month, or whatever it is. And I think those are just some of the things that you can actually try to help you when it comes to effective strategy execution using best practice. Are there any questions that any of you would like to ask us before we wrap up? Okay, nothing to ask. Okay, so just to wrap up, I just want to say, like I said, at the end of this webinar, you'll get practical tips that you can actually take with you and go and try and implement back in your organizations, in your teams, to try and see if you can really improve when it comes to effectively executing and monitoring your strategies. Okay. After the webinar, we will be sending everyone that has attended the webinar a little, we said we want to make you more aware and we want to give you more knowledge. So we will be sharing the BITEC checklist that Dan said there were 6 items on that checklist. We'll be sharing that with you. And for those of you who would like maybe to listen to the webinar afterwards, you will be able to, it will be put up on our YouTube page. If you would like a demo of ESOP, you can contact us. You can contact us and you can book a demo with us. You can find us on LinkedIn. It's Dan Mukosa you can find him as Dan Mukosa on LinkedIn. And myself, I'm Toela Zulu Mukosa, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Other than that, I just want to say thank you very much. We're very excited. We want to help people when it comes to just knowing more about strategy and how best you can actually execute it, because I think that's where strategies fail. They normally fail on the execution part. So we just really want to just help organizations really improve on that aspect. Dan, any closing remarks?
Look, I think for me, we're gonna keep having this conversation, I think, to the end of the year. I'm not sure if we'll be doing it weekly or bi-monthly, but I think we'll be touching on different topics around strategy execution. It's something we can talk about quite a lot because of how the term is used but not implemented, and also just helping people just be aware, because I think once you start doing that, then you start seeing how the technology fits in to enable a success implementation of strategy. But thanks very much for whoever has attended and has actually made the time to listen to us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to more engagements going forward.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
Cheers.